In this category, we're looking at the fact that as a leader, you have to have the courage to have difficult conversations. And on the flip side of that, you need to earn the right to deliver difficult feedback. So let's unpack these two a little bit. When I say that you need to have the courage to have difficult conversations, we have all either had leaders or managers that we were working with who did not have courage and who avoided difficult conversations and made our lives or our team's lives more difficult in the process. One of the pieces that is incredibly frustrating is that far too often leaders lack a functioning spine and they avoid these awkward situations, the difficult conversations. They know that someone doesn't fit or isn't performing or is being incredibly, their behaviour is incredibly difficult and causing problems for other team members or is not aligned with the values of the organisation. And yet that leader lacks the courage to actually confront that and deal with the issue. And that has such negative impacts and flow-on effects for a team. So you need to have that courage to have those difficult conversations. But equally true, on the other side, is that you actually need to earn the right to deliver that difficult feedback. We had, in an organisation that I used to run, we had this approach where we often described it as that within our relational core value, we would say, that's not about just being nice and saying what people want to hear. Part of what we saw as our role was the giving of that difficult feedback. So we would often use phrases like, we're willing to tell people their baby's ugly in terms of their business. So we might come in and say, there's no way this business model's going to work, which we framed as telling them their baby was ugly. We used phrases like that we were truth tellers. We would talk about aspects that sat within the category of we would get people to have aha moments, but we would do that by putting them in a headlock. All of this language was quite intense and full on. And it sat in that category where people like us, and I'm putting myself in this category because I was the leader of the organisation and the biggest culprit of this. So I'll talk about myself. So people like me would often say that it was about being brutally honest. And at the time that I was running this organisation, I read a really interesting article that Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about this idea of brutal honesty. And it was incredibly helpful for me. And so I brought it in and shared it with my team, and we all talked about reframing some of these ideas about the way that we gave this difficult feedback. And instead of purely framing things as that we had the courage to have difficult conversations, we started to sit with this both and approach of having the courage to have difficult conversations, but equally respecting the fact that we needed to earn the right to give difficult feedback. Here are the key ideas that Elizabeth Gilbert spoke about related to brutal honesty that we then took on board and that I brought into the team. So she says that you need to ask 4 questions before you take on board someone's feedback. The first is, do I trust their taste and judgment? The second is, do they understand what I'm trying to create? The third is, do they genuinely want me to succeed? And the fourth is, are they capable of delivering sensitive and compassionate feedback? So the way that I used this was I took Gilbert's 4 questions and I flipped them to be the precursors or the conditions that had to be in place for myself and my team to have earned the right to give difficult feedback. And I would encourage that you do the same thing. In order to give constructive criticism and to give this difficult feedback, you have to take the time to know the person and then ask the question of yourself, does this person feel those 4 things? So, have you actually earned their trust and the right to speak? And when I say, does this person that you're trying to give this feedback to, do they feel those 4 questions to be true and present? That's really important, because it's not just about, do you think you've done this? It's you having the empathy and thinking about whether that person that you're about to give this difficult feedback to, do they trust your taste and judgment? Do they actually feel like you understand what they're trying to create? That comes back to, have you taken the time to actually listen? Or did you just come in guns blazing with your solution? Do they feel really strongly and in a true sense of the word, do they feel that you genuinely want them to succeed? And do they think, and are they feeling with the way that you're interacting, that you are capable of delivering sensitive and compassionate feedback? That last one's important because it's that shift away from the really rough or gruff approach to having brutal honesty as the framing, and instead says, how do you do it in a sensitive and compassionate way? Now again, remember, I'm asking you to hold that approach alongside the fact that you have to have the courage to have difficult conversations. So what I'm not saying is everything has to be soft and pleasant and nice and passive. You're often going to be in a position where you need to deliver hard truths, but using those 4 questions can be a really helpful way to first make sure you have earned the right to deliver that feedback, and also to help you think about the way that you're going to deliver that feedback.